Imagine walking into a room full of expectations, only to have someone completely overlook you based on the color of your skin. That's exactly what happened when a white employee made a critical mistake while interviewing a black woman for a position. Little did he know, she wasn't just any candidate, she was the new HR director. When he refused to hire her, thinking she didn't fit the role, he had no idea the tables were about to turn in the most unexpected way. What followed was a series of shocking events that revealed the power dynamics at play in the workplace and how prejudice can blind even the most well-meaning individuals. How will this situation unfold? What happens when you realize your mistake too late, and the person you underestimated has the authority to change everything? Stick around to find out. The white employee, Steve, had been with the company for years, confident in his role and well-regarded by his colleagues. He had always prided himself on his ability to judge potential hires quickly, and when he saw the woman walk into the room, he immediately made assumptions. She didn't fit the mold of the perfect candidate he had envisioned. Her background wasn't what he expected, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she just wasn't the right fit for the team. Without giving her a fair chance, he dismissed her outright. What he didn't realize was that the woman sitting across from him wasn't just another job applicant. Her name was Maya, and her resume held credentials that spoke volumes. But it wasn't just her qualifications that would soon make Steve rethink his decisions. Maya had spent years in HR, and she knew exactly how to handle situations like this. What she did next would leave Steve in shock. After the interview, Maya walked out of the room with a calm expression, but inside she was fuming. She had worked tirelessly to reach her position, building her career from the ground up. This was supposed to be a big opportunity for her, a chance to not only bring change, but also set an example for the company. But Steve's dismissal of her felt like a slap in the face. He didn't see her as someone capable of making decisions, and that stung. What he didn't know was that Maya wasn't just any HR professional. She had a reputation for turning toxic work environments around and pushing for equality and fairness. She'd fought hard for her role, and now she wasn't about to let anyone undermine her. As she sat in her office, staring at the door Steve had just walked out of, she thought about what she should do next. She wasn't sure if confronting him immediately was the right move, but she knew one thing: she would not let this slide. Meanwhile, Steve returned to his desk, unaware of the storm brewing. He thought he'd just made a routine decision, dismissing another candidate who didn't measure up. But things were starting to shift in the office. Whispers began to spread, and employees who had been around for a while could feel the tension in the air. Something about Maya seemed different. Could it be that Steve had made a huge mistake? And if so, what consequences would he face when the truth came out? The days after the interview were tense. Maya kept her distance, observing Steve from the shadows. She knew her next move had to be calculated. If she approached him too soon, he might dismiss her concerns, assuming she was just another employee with a gripe. But Maya wasn't just any employee. She was the new HR director, and she would not be silenced. Steve, on the other hand, began to feel a creeping unease. People in the office seemed to be acting strangely around him. Conversations would pause when he walked by, and colleagues would exchange nervous glances. He chopped it up to office gossip, something that always happened after a big hire. But as the days went on, he started to notice Maya's quiet presence at every meeting, her sharp observations cutting through every conversation. She wasn't acting like someone who had been rejected for a job. It was as if she was already in charge. One afternoon, during a company-wide meeting, Maya stood up to present her plans for improving employee relations. As she spoke, Steve's discomfort grew. She wasn't just speaking as an HR director, she was speaking with authority, with the kind of confidence that Steve hadn't seen before. Her every word seemed to hit him like a challenge, and the realization began to dawn on him. He had underestimated her, he had dismissed her, and now everything was changing. The room fell silent as Maya paused to look directly at Steve, her eyes sharp and unwavering. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He could no longer ignore the fact that his previous decision was about to come back to haunt him. Was this the moment everything would unravel for him? Would his mistake cost him more than just his pride? The tension in the room was thick, and everyone could sense that something was about to break. But what exactly would it be? As Maya continued speaking, Steve's discomfort turned into panic. He glanced around the room, his heart racing. It wasn't just the power shift that unsettled him. It was the realization that he wasn't the only one who had misjudged the situation. The employees in the room were beginning to understand what was unfolding, and it was clear that Maya's authority was now undeniable. But just as Steve braced for the inevitable fallout, something unexpected happened. Maya's phone buzzed quietly on the table in front of her. She glanced at it, her expression flickering for just a moment. Then, without missing a beat, she continued with her presentation. But there was something different in the air, an unspoken tension that hung heavier than before. A few moments later, Maya excused herself abruptly from the meeting, citing an urgent matter. Steve watched her walk out, confused. His mind raced as the walls seemed to close in. What had just happened? Why had she cut the meeting short? Minutes later, an email pinged on Steve's computer. It was from the company's CEO. His palms began to sweat as he clicked open the message. It was a brief note. "Please report to my office immediately. We need to discuss your recent actions during the interview process." Steve froze. He had no idea what was coming, but one thing was clear. This was bigger than he could have ever imagined. The stakes had just been raised. Whatever had just unfolded behind closed doors with Maya was now escalating, and Steve had no way of knowing how far the consequences would go. Would he lose his job? Or was there something even more dire waiting for him? The clock was ticking, and Steve had no choice but to face the fallout from his misstep. But Maya wasn't done yet. Steve's hands trembled as he stood outside the CEO's office. His mind raced with questions. What did Maya know? Had she already reported him? Was he about to be fired? He had never felt this powerless in his career. With a deep breath, he knocked and entered. The CEO, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, motioned for him to sit. There was no small talk. "I've just been informed about your interview with Maya," she said coldly, her eyes narrowing. "It seems there was a significant misjudgment on your part. Maya is not just the new HR director, she's also overseeing the entire restructuring of this department, and she's made it clear that her decisions will not be ignored." Steve's chest tightened as the words sank in. He had no idea that Maya was already pulling the strings behind the scenes, or that she held so much power. I didn't realize," he stammered, but the CEO cut him off. "Your actions have repercussions, Steve. I've already spoken to several employees, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly negative about your behavior. You failed to recognize a talented professional when you saw one, and now you've caused unnecessary tension. The team expects change, and it's clear you're not the right person to lead them through it." Steve felt the ground slip out from under him. This was it, the moment he'd feared. He wasn't just losing his job, he was losing his entire reputation within the company. Just as he was about to speak, the door opened and Maya walked in. She stood there, calm and composed, her eyes meeting Steve's with an unsettling knowing. "I trust you've heard the news," she asked, her voice almost too smooth. Steve swallowed hard, unable to respond. The CEO nodded to Maya. "You'll take over his responsibilities immediately. You've proven yourself more than capable." Maya nodded, her expression unreadable, before turning to leave. But just before she reached the door, she paused and looked back at Steve with a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Oh, and Steve, the company values fairness, equality, and integrity. Maybe it's time you started doing the same." As the door closed behind her, Steve sat frozen, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had lost, and in the most unexpected way possible. But what really shook him was the final twist. Maya hadn't just been hired to oversee HR. She was the one who had orchestrated the entire change in leadership from the top down. Her interview had been a test, and Steve had failed miserably. The room felt smaller now, the realization settling in that his future in the company was over, all because of his own blind prejudice. It was clear. Maya hadn't just come to change the department, she'd come to change everything. In the weeks that followed, Steve packed up his desk, the weight of his downfall heavy on his shoulders. The company slowly adjusted to Maya's leadership, and the changes she implemented were nothing short of transformative. Her approach to fairness and inclusion was exactly what the department had needed. Employees, once hesitant, began to speak up more, and productivity soared. Maya's calm yet assertive leadership had reshaped the culture in ways Steve had never imagined. As for Steve, he learned a harsh lesson: prejudice and assumption have consequences. His inability to see Maya for who she truly was cost him not only his job, but also his credibility. But it wasn't just his career at stake. The story became a wake-up call for the entire company. Maya had not just earned respect, she'd forced change in the most powerful way possible. And in the end, it was her vision that would shape the future.